This is my 2022 garden tour, starting off with the compost bin. I really don't get enough scraps to have a lot of compost, but I get a little bit every year, and I tend to use it on my tomatoes because that's the fruit that I'm most interested in raising. So now we'll go around here to the actual garden, and in the front here I have 4 pepper plants. They seem to be doing pretty well and looks like they're starting to bloom, so I'm optimistic. I bought those, but they seem to be doing okay so far. And then here in these cages I've got some cucumbers. The cucumbers that I raised indoors didn't really do well. They all kind of died, so I just direct seeded 3 sets, and they seem to be doing pretty well. So I'm optimistic that I'll be able to get some cucumbers yet this year. And that's a yellow squash, I believe. And this plant on that side, I'm not sure if that's a weed or a squash. I'm going to let it go a little longer before I make a decision whether to pull it out or not. And in the far corner there, I have a spaghetti squash. One didn't survive, but that one did survive, so I'm optimistic that I'll get at least a few spaghetti squash. And I'll be able to cover this up in the fall, so I'm hopeful that I'll be able to extend the growing season on some of those vegetables, and that should help. And this next raised bed, all the long spindly things are parsley that's going to seed. And you can see in the front there amongst the parsley I've got some lettuce, and in the back here I've got some real nice lettuce. I've been eating lettuce at least once a day, I think, for a couple of weeks, and you can see I'm really not getting ahead of it. I'm barely holding my own. But I'll be eating a few more salads, so that's some really nice lettuce there. And that's just kind of self-seeded, so I'm happy to enjoy that. And I think you can see that there are some peas in amongst the lettuce, and a little further in the front here. They're doing pretty well also, so I'm hopeful to get a few fresh peas a little later on. And then, I'm not sure if you can see it, but I've got a few carrots right there, and a few carrots right there, and a few other carrots scattered around, and also right down there, what they're still pretty small, are some beets. I planted some beets and only a few of them grew, but that's okay because I'm not that crazy about beets anyway. And then here, got 10 tomato plants in there, and the front 2 are really doing pretty well. They're starting to bloom. That one you can see there where I've got the wall of water around it. It's really small, but most of the rest of them look like they're doing pretty well. And my plan is, let's see if I can get back here far enough away, is to drape a clear plastic tarp over that framework in the fall, so I can hopefully extend the growing season on those tomato plants as well. And then over here in the corner, the woman that gave me these plants told me that they were a form of garlic, but I saw a gardening book that I was looking at this year that they're actually called walking onions, or Egyptian walking onions, I guess. And the reason they're called that is because the, as you can see, the top will eventually bend down into the ground when it gets heavy enough and reseed itself. But I plan to cut them off And I've got a spot here that I'm going to plant them, so I'll have some onions for next year. And then back here in the shade, there's that's a spinach plant there, and it's amongst the parsley. There's another spinach plant. I'm hopeful that keeping them in the shade will make them a little longer to bolt so that I'll actually get some spinach. And then in the back there I've got a lettuce plant that again I'm hoping will be able to harvest after the other ones in the sun go to seed. And I think there's a couple of radishes in next to that lettuce, so I'll have to check that out. Over here, that's a basil plant there and another basil plant. I bought them and they seem to be doing pretty well. I don't know what these flowers are called, but they're just there, so I just enjoy them. And then all this parsley that you can see that's going to seed. In amongst that parsley, I have 5 of the 6 asparagus plants that I originally bought are still surviving, and I got about 12 or 13 spears this year, which is the best that I've ever done, but it's not all that great. So every year I keep hoping that maybe next year will be better, and this year was the best year, but maybe next year I'll actually get a good harvest. And then in the front here you can see that's just another tomato plant, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's a couple of those onions there. And here's another tomato plant, and back here we have a basil and a cilantro, and there's another onion there next to the tomato. My cilantro is actually doing really well, so I've never been able to raise any cilantro, so I'm pretty excited about that. I do a lot of Spanish type dishes every once in a while, and they call for cilantro, so I've usually just substituted parsley, but this year I'll actually be able to use cilantro. And this is just another tomato plant. Seems to be doing okay. And then over here on the patio we have another cilantro. That's doing pretty well. And there's a pepper plant there. And you probably can't see it, but hiding behind the pepper plant is a purple basil, so I'm hopeful that they will coexist and I'll actually get some purple basil as well as the others. And this is just another tomato plant in here. It's still pretty small. And there's another cilantro in that dish. It's doing okay. And here in the front two pots, we have cilantro and the basil in the back one. And then, see if I can get here back far enough, you can see that my rose bush is doing pretty well again this year. It was a lot nicer earlier, about a week or so ago. The blooms don't last all that long. And let me show you one other thing here around the side. It seems like every year this manages to send up a shoot under the garage and under the sidewalk, and I cut it off, but it's very persistent, so I'll probably cut it off again this year. But that's my garden tour. I'll probably do another update later in the summer.